Hi everyone, so this is going to be my first video for my Raspberry Pi blog, but it's going to be a little bit about Nintex as well, because one of the points I want to have around the Raspberry Pi, stuff that I've been kind of playing around with, is the ability to capture events from a particular sensor and do some things around that. But at the same time, I also want to be able to maybe call an Nintex workflow and do something with that. So for those who don't know what Nintex is, have a look at my Nintex blog. There's a ton of stuff on there, or go to nintex.com. Also a lot of information about there about automating things. Okay, so this is Nintex Workflow Cloud, and what I've done is actually created a workflow called NWC External Event Workflow. Now, there's a couple of parts. There's a really simple workflow. It just sends an email, so nothing too crazy about this one. But here is my start event. My start event is an Nintex connector. The event is an external start, and I've created a couple of start event variables, an event amount, which is a decimal, and an event name, which is text. Now, you can add others, of course, if you want. And then when I click on my send an email, all I'm doing is sending myself an email to my work address, and I'm inserting those start variables. So pretty straightforward. Okay, now let's actually publish this again. Actually, you know what? No, I'm not going to publish this. When you publish it, you get a bunch of information. The reason why I don't want to publish it again is just in case that changes, so it'll mess up my my Python script. So you get things like a Swagger URL, the actual REST call endpoint, right, which is HTTPS, and you use a post to actually call into it. There's a token, which I don't really care as much about. I think the token actually gets regenerated when you republish the workflow, so I'm going to leave that one as is. That's why I don't want to republish my workflow. There's a request header content type, which is application/JSON. And then there's also a little bit of JSON data, which is the actual parameters that you want to pass in. And I'll show you all that in a moment. Now, you can see very, very simple workflow here. Now, what I'm going to do is actually jump into a remote desktop I have into my Raspberry Pi. So I've created a little Python script. You can see here we're importing the request library. We have a URL. This is the REST endpoint that you get from Nintex Workflow Cloud. Now, of course, this is Nintex Workflow Cloud. You can call any REST endpoint. This is just an example because I do a lot of work around Nintex and I'm a Nintex employee. This makes it a little bit easier for me to kind of mess around with this stuff rather than having to build an actual REST service. You can see the data variable here. So this is just basically the JSON data. Now, one thing I did notice is I actually had to put in these backslashes at the end of each line. Again, this is just me with my limited Python experience. So I had to do that for a long text string. Okay, the other important thing, and this is really important, is this headers variable where you can see the content type equals or is application/JSON. This is the content type that you get told when you publish the workflow. So I had to put that in and then in the actual request that I'm sending, so you can see request, I'm doing a post. I'm sending it to the URL up here, the data, which is the JSON data, so and the headers, which is this part here. Now the data, I didn't actually mention, these are the two start variables in the workflow. So you can see I have amount or event amount and event name, and I'm just hard coding some values. Now, what I will do later down the track is I'll actually build a Python script that is running or that gets run based on some event happens from some sensor on the Raspberry Pi, and I want it to kick off a workflow. So that's down the track once I get my head around how to do that stuff. Now I'm getting a response object back, and all I'm doing is just printing the text. So I don't really care about as much about the response at the moment. I'm just going to assume it works. Okay, so this is my script. I've called it NWC start.py, and then I'm going to jump into my Raspberry Pi command line prompt here. So let's actually go back to the workflow. So bear with me. Okay, so here's the workflow, and I'm going to jump into this thing here. I'm going to click on instances, and you'll see I have two running instances, but they're completely different workflows. You can see from November, and I have one completed NWC external start. So what I'm going to do is actually go back in here, And to run my Python script, I just have to write Python space the name of my script and press enter. Give it a second, and there you have a GUID. Now I know if I get a GUID, the workflow, the call was successful, the REST call was successful. So if I jump back into my Nintex Workflow Cloud here, and I click on refresh, there should be a second workflow that just started here. So 10:42 a.m., 10:42 a.m. It started, it completed, and if I actually jump into my email, I'm going to pop my email open right there. You can see intruder alert 20.4, and if I look at my Python script, there's my 20.4 and intruder alert. So I'm successfully making a call from Python to Nintex Workflow Cloud to kick off a workflow, and I'm passing in some parameters. So ideally, once we capture some information from a Raspberry Pi sensor, maybe from a camera, maybe from a moisture sensor, temperature sensor, humidity, etc., we can have this kick off a workflow. And you can see hardly any code from the Raspberry Pi itself, right, from Python, and you can automate a lot of that sort of stuff in the actual Nintex workflow. So some interesting stuff. Hopefully I'll build some more blog posts around this and make things a little bit easier. I will share this Python script, although I'll change the URL, but you'll be able to play around with that, and hopefully it'll make things a little bit easier for you as you start making your own REST calls from Python or REST calls to Nintex Workflow Cloud. Okay, I know that was a whirlwind kind of tour of this. Hopefully this helps you a little bit. Let me know if you guys have any questions, and I'll look into them. Thanks very much.